Good evening or afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is Natalia Abrams from Student Debt Crisis Center, and we thank you for joining us for Student Loans 201. We're going to discuss the new Biden administration policies and what you need to know about restarting payments. For those of you that joined us last night, thank you for 101. I know that our wonderful team will share it in the chat. We're just going to give folks a second to join, and we'll get started here in a minute or two. Thank you. All right, thank you again for joining us today for Student Loans 201, Biden administration policies and what you need to know about starting repayment. We will be taking ample time at the end of this slide deck to go through your questions. Please use the Q&A box to ask your questions. The chat is used for us to share links with you all, but we will address questions in the Q&A box. And with that, let's get started. Again, I'm Natalia Abrams, president here at Student Debt Crisis Center. Thank you for joining us this evening or afternoon for Student Loans 201. I'm joined by my colleagues. Frankly, we have most of the team here today. We have Sabrina Ashley, Sabrina Calazans, Spencer Dixon, and Shayna Hayes, all here to help you answer your questions. And again, please use the Q&A box. So today we are going over 201, plans, policies, and programs, the Save on Repayment program, which was introduced last year, the on-ramp start to repayment, fresh start, and the one-time IDR or income-driven repayment account adjustment. Last night we covered Student Loans 101, which was loan types. It was the basics, loan types, consolidation, loan servicers, and repayment options. And tomorrow we'll be going in depth on pathways to forgiveness, public service loan forgiveness, teacher loan forgiveness, and other types of forgiveness programs. If you haven't already, please join us tomorrow, and you can sign up by the link that's being shared in the chat tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. So today we're going to go over the SAVE program and the on-ramp as we discussed earlier. At the end, we will have a verbal Q&A period where we will be reading some questions from the Q&A box. Please hold questions that are not on the topics being covered today. We will be prioritizing questions based on the topics, questions based on the topics that we are covering today. And always we will try to get to as many questions as we can. Lastly, just a disclaimer here, we are not financial counselors nor attorneys. We are advocates and experts. Most of the folks on this Zoom today are borrowers here to help you navigate your student loan situation. So getting started, unfortunately, many of us that have been following this issue know that the Supreme Court ruled that the president did not have the authority under the HEROES Act. This was this past June. As President Biden says, he disagrees with the court. I agree with the president on this one. This was, not the decision that we should have happened. We believe and still believe that the law was on our side, but at last we are here. The SCOTUS decision or Supreme Court decision remains specific to the HEROES Act, and it left the door open for plan B or for the president to pursue other options. On the day that we lost with the Supreme Court, President Biden came out and announced that he will pursue student debt cancellation through the Higher Education Act of 1965. This is different than the HEROES Act that was used for the Supreme Court case. This is a lengthy process, which requires public hearings, comment periods, which we passed. And thank you to any of you that submitted comment. More than 30,000 of Student Debt Crisis Center supporters did, and a negotiated rulemaking process that will begin early next month. And we will keep asking you and encouraging you to share your stories during this comment period and negotiating process. And lastly, we expect a final rule sometime next year. So stay tuned and watch this space. So moving forward, we're here to talk today about repayment. As many of you know, but if you don't, interest began accruing on August 1st after more than 3.5 years of a COVID payments pause. Payments are beginning on October 1st. We know many of you are concerned and have reached out to us on what to do. Some of you have never paid your loans or graduated during the pandemic, and this is your first time looking at student loan repayment. So when you get into repayment, it's a 10-year standard repayment. And we have standard there in quotes because so many of the borrowers we work with have been in repayment for far more than that 10-year period. But your loan amount, will be averaged over the 10 years. You'll have your monthly payment. And what happens though, if you cannot make that fixed monthly payment, there are more affordable options. So right now, there is an on-ramp repayment program. Payments are resuming in October. The first bills will be set to go out starting October 1st with interest that has already begun to accrue. And the on-ramp period will launch a 12-month repayment program for borrowers who may miss a payment, and you will not be sent to collection agencies or credit bureaus, and you will not be put into default. These are the pros. So if you are unable to make your payment and you don't think an income-driven repayment program, which we're about to go into, is right for you, then you may want to utilize this on-ramp period. There is no need to apply, as you can see underlined, to receive these benefits. This will be automatic if you fail to pay. The cons, however, though, are interest will continue to accrue. So unlike this current pandemic payment pause that is ending right now, where interest was paused as well, interest is no longer paused. It will accrue. And if you are not enrolled in an income-driven repayment program, future monthly bills will automatically be adjusted to reflect the accrued interest during those months. Lastly, if you are in an income-driven repayment program or you are trying to get your 10 years for public service loan forgiveness, missed payments will not be counted. You will not get credit towards those programs if you miss payments and utilize the on-ramp period. So we're going to talk a lot today about the SAVE program, and that is an income-driven repayment program. And we're going to talk a lot about the benefits of income-driven repayment programs. So these can make your payments more affordable. They base your loan amount on your income versus your loan amount. And monthly payments are calculated as a percentage of discretionary income based on family income and family size. A question we get a lot is cost of living. Unfortunately, that is not taken into account. It is the discretionary income calculation, and my colleague Spencer will be talking more to you about that shortly. So this helps folks who have lower incomes or may have lost their job. This, is additionally, if you are on strike right now or you've been furloughed, that would count as no income. It's based on current income versus annual income. So if you've lost your job, you can apply to get the lowest payment possible. It also prevents delinquency and default. It locks these payments, these monthly payments in for 1 year. So if you are to get a job a month later, you could still potentially have a $0 payment for that 12-month period of time. The con, and we know from a lot of you, this is a big con, it does extend the loan repayment period to 20 or 25 years, based on whether you have an undergraduate or graduate degree and based on what program you are in. And here's a snapshot of some of the major programs that when you may go through the student loan simulator to see what program's right for you. More than often, these are the programs that show up. So there was revised pay as you earn. This is now the SAVE program. So the new SAVE program, if you were on repay, you are automatically enrolled in the SAVE program. And we are going to go in depth on that. There's another program called Pay As You Earn. This may be a good option for the people with graduate school loans because it would be a repayment period of 20 years versus 25 years for graduate school loans. However, you do have to prove undue hardship for the Pay As You Earn program, which is slightly different than these other programs. Regular income-based repayment and income contingent repayment. The way these are listed are from most generous SAVE to the least generous programs to borrowers is how we put it. So the changes are based on the discretionary income amount. So income contingent repayment is 20% of the income versus revised pay as you earn, which is, SAVE program, which is 10%, and that will be cut in half next year for undergraduate borrowers. Again, Spencer will talk more about that. We showed this just to show you that SAVE isn't the only plan, it's the new plan, and we know many of you are joining us to find out more about how SAVE works. And with that, I'm going to pass it to my colleague Spencer to do just that.
Thank you, Natalia. So first, when talking about SAVE, we just want to break down a few basics. So first, which loans qualify for SAVE? All direct loans, whether you had subsidized or unsubsidized, and whether they were for undergrad or grad, as long as they were direct loans, and direct consolidation loans. Although, if you have a direct consolidation loan that contains a Parent Plus loan, that is not going to be eligible unless you go through a process called double consolidation. I am not going to get into the details of that tonight because it's quite wonky, but you can learn more about that on our 101 series that we did last night, and the YouTube link should be shared in the chat if it isn't already. So borrowers who have undergrad and grad loans will pay a weighted average starting next year, but between 5 and 10% of their income based on the original principal balance of their loans. So original principal balance is basically what the government sent your school when you originally took out the loans without a cent of interest. So for me, I'm a borrower and I have undergrad and grad debt. I have more grad debt than undergrad debt. So my percentage would be about 8% based off of my breakdown and scenario. So which loans do not qualify? Just going back a second. So Parent Plus loans on their own, they only qualify for ICR, and that's even only after they've been consolidated. And then FFEL loans do not qualify for SAVE. However, any borrower that has an FFEL loan can consolidate their loan or really convert their loan into a direct consolidation loan in order to qualify for SAVE. Again, if you're thinking about that or that might apply to you, would encourage you to go back and look at our 101 that dives deep into consolidation. So next, when can borrowers apply for SAVE? Right now, as Natalia mentioned, the Biden administration has already launched this program and has converted repay into SAVE. And if you were a borrower who was already enrolled in Repay, you are now enrolled in Save. And then a really helpful update and a new aspect of Save compared to other IDRs is the IRS integration, which allows borrowers to automatically give the Federal Student Aid Administration permission to pull your tax return from the IRS, which can serve as your income proof for the normal annual recertification process. So if you opt in and you stay enrolled and saved, aka you don't actively unenroll yourself, you will be in the program for as long as you need to, which hopefully means as long as you're in your repayment and then you get forgiveness. This can be really, really helpful so that folks do not miss their recertification process, which is really important to being able to stay enrolled in these programs. So now we'll take a dive into some of the provisions of SAVE and breaking them down between those that are in effect now, and then in a few slides, we'll talk about those going in effect next summer. So, Natalia talked about IDRs overall, and she talked about there are 4 current IDRs, but we're focusing on SAVE, and before diving into the effects that are going into next year, I wanted to cover this year. So, like all IDRs, SAVE only you only are determining your monthly payment under SAVE by just 2 factors: your annual income and your family size. The lower a borrower's income and the larger their family size, the less they have to pay. Each IDR has different measures of what counts as income or discretionary income, and different percentages that you have to pay. To determine what counts as income, IDRs separate discretionary and non-discretionary income. Basically, think of non-discretionary income as what the government considers what is needed to cover basic necessities. The higher that threshold, the less of your remaining income will have to go towards paying your student loans. It's also sort of like taking the standard tax deduction. That 12 or so $1,000 is not taxed at all. That's how you can sort of think of non-discretionary income. And the new SAVE plan increases that threshold to the highest it's ever been, meaning a single borrower that works full-time at roughly $15 an hour or less will have a monthly payment of $0 per month. Those that make more than that would only have their incomes above that threshold counted in the calculation for how much they would have to pay. And so, as you can see on the chart on the right, under Repay in green, those thresholds were lower. For a single borrower, it was just above 20,000 was the point at which their income would have to start going towards their student loans. But for SAVE, it's over 35,000. And that number, that threshold goes up the larger your household or family size is. And so next we will cover the other provision that's going into effect, that's already in effect, I should say. So in the past, borrowers enrolled in IDRs with low monthly payments, like $0 or $50, would often have monthly interest accrual that would be more than their monthly payments. For many borrowers, this accrued interest could then get capitalized, where the interest gets added to the principal. This really frustrating, discouraging process is how so many borrowers that we've heard from were making their monthly payment only to see their balances rise in the long run. SAVE puts a stop to this by having the government cover any unpaid interest each month as long as you are enrolled in the program and pay your monthly payment. So we have an example here to make a little more sense of this. So under this example, it's a single borrower who makes $40,000 a year. Under Repay, their monthly payment would have been $151, but their monthly interest accrual would be 200, which is obviously bigger than their payment. So that difference would be $49. Under repay, the government would cover half of that unpaid interest, but they would only do so for 2 years. And so in this example, 2450 would be carried over to the next month as accrued interest. And if this person missed their recertification deadline, all of that accrued interest would then be added to the principal, which is again how, in many cases, borrowers' balances would grow over time. Under save, that no longer happens. So this same borrower has a lower monthly payment because of the change in that threshold that I talked about on the last slide. The monthly interest is the same because the loan's the same, the interest is the same. The difference is greater because the monthly payment is less. And in this case, there's zero carryover interest because the government is stepping in to pay that each month. Finally, it's worth mentioning that SAVE excludes spousal income for borrowers who are married and file separately. Repay and other IDRs used to include spousal income, even in the case when a married borrower filed separately. For those borrowers who may be married and are currently filing jointly, you will have to make that decision as to whether the savings on your student loans is going to be worth filing separately in the next tax year. So that's something to be mindful of when it comes to tax time and how your student loans are affected. So next, we'll talk about the provisions going into effect next summer. Starting next summer, SAVE will cut the amount borrowers have to pay each month on their discretionary income on undergraduate loans from 10% to 5%. And as I mentioned, for those that have both undergrad and grad, it's going to be a weighted percentage based off of your original loan amount. And then the last part of SAVE going into effect next summer is great, but it's also the most confusing. This last provision provides some flexibility to the forgiveness available under IDRs. Currently, to get forgiveness through an IDR, and what I'm talking about here is separate and sort of less generous than the forgiveness that's available through public service loan forgiveness, which we'll go into great detail in tomorrow and touch upon tonight. A borrower must be in repayment under IDR forgiveness for 20 years if they only have undergrad debt, or 25 years if they have grad debt. That repayment time used to not at all be based on the original loan balance, meaning many borrowers with relatively lower balances would have to be in repayment for that 20 to 25 years. So they would not feasibly be able to get any forgiveness because they'd have to be in repayment for so long. SAVE changes that by adding that original loan balance as a factor in determining how long a borrower must be in repayment to get forgiveness. With borrowers with $12,000 or less in the original loan balance, the time in repayment needed for forgiveness gets cut in half from 20 to 10 years. Above that 12,000 threshold, above that $12,000 threshold, the time in repayment needed for forgiveness goes up for 1 year for each additional $1,000 in original loan balances above that threshold. And the next slide shows how long borrowers must be in repayment in order to get that forgiveness. So for borrowers with only undergrad debt, you will benefit from these flexibilities if your original loan balance was less than $22,000. If you have any graduate debt, you will benefit from these flexibilities if your original loan balance was less than $27,000. So just to break this down a little bit, as I mentioned, if you have $12,000 or less, the most you'll be in repayment is 10 years. And I should mention these repayment years are total, they're cumulative. It's not 10 years in SAVE, it's 10 years in any sort of repayment. So if you had $13,000 in undergrad, you would be in repayment for 11 years, $14,000, 12 years, and so on. And so that's why if you're under the $22,000 threshold, you're going to benefit in some way. If you're closer to 12, you'll be benefiting more. And if you're closer to 22, it's going to be closer to that 20-year, but you might still get a year or two or three closer than you would be otherwise. So lastly, in the SAVE world is the impact for grad loans. As I mentioned, if you have under 27,000, you're going to benefit. And unfortunately, if you have any outstanding grad whatsoever, regardless of the amount, 20 is the minimum that you'll be able to. 20 is the number of years you have to be in repayment in order to get forgiveness. All right, next we will just reiterate and close on SAVE by just reiterating some of these savings. So on the chart to the left, starting this summer are the estimated payments under the SAVE plan. So all of those boxes in green are $0 payments. So if you are a borrower, and this is sort of similar to the other graph that we had earlier. If you're a single borrower making roughly $35,000 a year, you're going to have a $0 payment. If you have a larger family size, that threshold goes up. And so the payments in gray are what borrowers would have to pay. And this is, of course, just an example. It is worth mentioning that this is what it would be this year, assuming that this chart is just for undergraduate loans. The figures in gray would actually be cut in half next year because the percentage of discretionary income that you have to pay drops from 10% to 5% in half. So just to reiterate, like payments under other IDRs, payments under SAVE are based on just two things, your income and your family size. Your payment is not based on your loan balance. However, your loan balance can be a factor in the number of years needed for repayment, as we talked about. And then starting this year, more borrowers will be eligible for a $0 payment than ever, as I've said. So next, we'll provide some examples of how this actually is applied. So we've got Shannon here, and we've got two snapshots in time. So the fall of 2023, right now, Shannon has an annual income of $38,000, zero dependents. She began repayment in 2019, so was only paying for about a year before the pandemic paused. Her loan balance is $25,000, and her monthly interest is $104 based off of an example 5% interest rate. Under the repay plan, she would have had a $134 monthly payment. Under SAVE, that's more than cut in half to $43. And that is exclusively because of that increased threshold of her income that is protected from having to pay on her student loans. Starting next summer, when all aspects of SAVE go into effect, her monthly payment is cut in half because Shannon only has undergrad loans. And so the percentage of her discretionary income that she has to pay goes from 10% to 5%, meaning that her monthly payment is just $22. The other thing to point out here is that even though Shannon's monthly payment was less than her monthly interest, the government is going to kick in and pay that. Whereas under repay, that was not the case. So Shannon, as long as she makes her monthly payment, the difference of her monthly payment and the interest gets covered by the government under SAVE. Next, we have Mark. He has an annual income of $28,000, one dependent. He's a borrower who's been in repayment longer, starting in 2011, has a relatively lower balance of $15,000. And for the ease of the simplicity of the example, he also has a 5% interest rate and a monthly accrual of interest of $6,250. Because of his relatively low income, Mark had a $0 payment under repay and definitely has a $0 payment under SAVE. By next summer, when all aspects of SAVE go into effect, Mark doesn't have any interest and he doesn't have any payment because his balance has been forgiven. recall that in order to get forgiveness for balances above 12,000, it's 1 year of additional repayment over the 10-year repayment for each additional $1,000 in original loan balance. So 15,000 is 3,000 over 12,000. And so by July of next year, it will have been 13 years since Mark began repayment, meaning that regardless of how long he's been in save, which has only been a year, he's been in repayment for 13 years, meaning he would get forgiveness under the save program. So we're just covering here enrolling in IDRs, including SAVE, what that process looks like. So you submit an application, which you can start at studentaid.gov. You select a repayment plan, which for most borrowers, SAVE is going to be the best, although not all borrowers qualify for SAVE, and in some cases, borrowers may benefit from another repayment plan. Your servicer will process your paperwork, and then you will be notified that you have been enrolled in the IDR. And you do have to recertify your income every 12 months to stay in the program and to prevent any capitalizing interest. However, as I talked about, if you opt in to that integration, the government will do that for you, and you can sort of put it on autopilot. The other thing I wanted to mention, which I don't remember anymore, so we'll move on, so we'll dive next into the IDR account adjustment. So before diving into the details, let's set the stage for what this is. As many borrowers on this workshop can attest, student loan servicers in the past, and in some cases today, have not always provided the fullest, most accurate information to borrowers, which I think is a pretty diplomatic way of saying it. And in some cases, these servicers actively misled borrowers entirely. For example, while income-driven repayment plans have been around for over 25 years, many student loan servicers in the past directed borrowers into deferment or forbearance options that provided short-term relief, but prevented borrowers from reaping the benefits of IDRs, including accumulating the payment credits needed to make them eligible for forgiveness. Because of this historic mismanagement, the Biden administration is looking back at each individual borrower's account and retroactively counting nearly every month, with some limited exceptions, when a borrower was in repayment or should have been in some form of repayment. This flexibility is really good news for borrowers, especially those who have had their loans for longer, as it speeds up your pathway to forgiveness. So what we've got here on the slide is a listing of any categories that is going to retroactively count as a qualifying payment or a qualifying credit. So any months in repayment status, regardless of the payment made, loan type, or repayment plan. If you had 12 or more months of consecutive forbearance or 36 months or more of cumulative forbearance, those months and then any months over that threshold are going to count. And that's really because no borrower should have ever been in forbearance that long. There's really no benefit to them. And that means their servicer was mismanaging their account. Months spent in economic hardship or for military deferments after 2013, months spent in any deferment with the exception of in-school deferment prior to 2013, and any time in repayment on earlier loans prior to consolidation of those loans into a consolidation loan, which is also really helpful for borrowers who may have been sort of penalized by the consolidation process in the past, are now going to retroactively kind of get cumulative credit for those times. So next, we'll break down how the account adjustment affects different borrowers. So borrowers who have reached 240, which is equivalent to 20 years, or 300 months, which is equivalent to 25 years, worth of payments for IDR forgiveness or 120 months of PSLF have begun to see their loans canceled this year. There was a big announcement in July of tens of billions of dollars worth of forgiveness through this process, which was essentially done almost automatically as long as a borrower at any point in time had been enrolled in an IDR. Borrowers who have commercially held FFEL loans, and these are borrowers who were not subject to the payment pause. So if you had to make payments on your federal loans during the payment pause, that means you very likely have commercially held FFEL loans, as well as Perkins or health education assistance loans or HEAL loans should apply for consolidation by the end of 2023 to get full benefits of the one-time account adjustment. This is covered in more detail in 101, where we cover consolidation, but there is a deadline at the end of this year in order to be eligible for the one-time account adjustment. So if you have these older loans, this forgiveness is waiting for you, but you have to take action. You have to consolidate or convert these older loan types into a direct consolidation loan and enroll in an IDR in order to fully qualify. All other borrowers will begin to see their accounts updated with any additional qualifying months toward IDR and PSLF forgiveness in 2024. So basically, think of this as the government, as I said, going through individually to make sure that everyone's getting their credits as much as they can. But they're starting with the older, they're starting with borrowers who've been in repayment the longest, and they're starting with those that are closest to that threshold, and they're sort of working backwards. But even if you're not super close to forgiveness, you're very likely going to benefit from this account adjustment based off of the qualifier, the eligibility that I've talked about. So next, we'll provide an example of the IDR account adjustment in action. So we've got Diane. This fall, she is an administrative assistant at a private firm, which means she is not eligible for public service loan forgiveness. She has a commercially held FFEL loan, and she's been in repayment for since 2004. Her loan balance now is $65,000. And in her case, that might have been a lot of accrued and capitalized interest over time. Because Diane consolidated her loans before the end of this year, her loan type was converted to a direct consolidation loan, and she enrolled in an IDR, making herself eligible for the one-time account adjustment. And because she's been in repayment since 2004 and her loans were only undergrad, that will be 20 years by next summer. And her loans will be forgiven because she took action and because of the one-time account adjustment. Next, we'll talk about how IDR interacts with PSLF on a higher level. So in order to benefit from PSLF, you have to be in an income-driven repayment plan. One, because it's how the program was originally designed, and two, because you want to make the least, you want to make a payment as low as you can that is still going to be a qualifying legal payment in order to get the maximum benefit. You want to sort of hoard away as much of your balance as possible and then unlock that after you've met the qualifications for the program, which I'll cover on the next slide. So this is just a brief overview of PSLF for the purposes of understanding how the one-time account adjustment interacts with it. As I said, a longer, more detailed explanation of the program will be provided in the 301 version of our series, which we are holding tomorrow. So some things to know about the program. It went into effect on August 1st, 2007. So any of these qualifications only start at that point in time. You have to have accumulated 120 months of qualifying payments, which, if it's uninterrupted and there's no issues, equates to 10 years. And then you do need some time for the application to be processed and approved. Um, Payment credits are cumulative, not consecutive, meaning that if you worked for a qualifying PSLF employer for several years and then you left and worked for a private employer, but then you came back and worked for a PSLF employer again, you're not going to start at zero. You're going to pick up where you left off. So as long as you have a direct loan, you have a qualifying employer, you're in a qualifying repayment plan, and you've documented your employment through the PSLF form or the employer certification form, which is the one and only application for PSLF. Once you've hit 120 and your application has been accepted and approved, all of your remaining debt is forgiven tax-free. I think so for the purposes of one-time account adjustment, we can go to the next slide. That's perfect. So for the purposes of the one-time account adjustment and PSLF, it's very similar to how it's treated across the board, but there's special treatment for those that ever completed at least one PSLF form. And if you did, and you have worked for that employer for the right number of years, you will be able to have your debt forgiven somewhat more automatically than would be otherwise without the account adjustment. And borrowers, and sort of beating a dead horse here, but it's a really important point. Borrowers with commercially held or federally held FFEL loans who consolidate those loans into direct consolidation loans before the account adjustment, which means the deadline of December 31st of this year, it's applied and will get PSLF credit on the years prior to consolidation, which was not true prior to some of these Biden administration flexibilities. But it's crucial that you consolidate before the deadline, and it's also crucial that you fill out at least one employer certification form before that deadline as well, so that the government knows that you're pursuing PSLF. And with that, I will pass it to my colleague Sabrina to cover Fresh Start and a few other remaining programs. Sabrina?
Thank you, Spencer. Thank you. That was really helpful. I know that I learned a lot in this segment, so thank you for that. So I've seen a couple of questions pop up in the Q&A about loans in default. So let's talk about that. So what is default? Default is a status that your loan falls into after not making a payment for a set amount of time. Typically, it's about 270 days, which is about 9 months. So if you are in default, there are a few things that you can take away from Fresh Start. So this is a program that streamlines the process for folks to get out of default, but there are exceptions to this. So if you have Perkins loans, unfortunately, this does not apply to you. And if you have those commercially held FFEL loans and they went into default during the payment pause, so after March 20th of 2020, then this does not apply to you, unfortunately. But if you were in default prior to the pandemic, Fresh Start is something that could be of help to you. A few of the benefits are automatically applied when it comes to Fresh Start for eligible borrowers, and there are also benefits that expire 1 year after the payment pause ends, unless you take additional steps, which I'll talk about on the next slide. But these benefits that are automatically applied through Fresh Start is access to federal student aid, collections have been stopped, eligibility for other government loans, restoring the ability to rehabilitate your loans, and loans classified as current to credit reporting agencies instead of being considered in collections. So now, in order for you to enroll in Fresh Start, because the words on studentaid.gov says automatic, but there are actually some steps that you have to take as well. There are 3 ways for you to enroll. So you can do so online by going to myeddebt.ed.gov and logging into an account. You can also call the phone number And then we have some tips here. So before calling, make sure that you're looking into any documentation that might be helpful for you. So having income tax information, and then what to expect on the phone is that it might take about 10 minutes. Again, it might take a little bit longer, it might be a little bit shorter. I think it varies on the person. And a representative will ask you for some additional information to find your record. And then they are going to ask you why you are calling, and your answer should be fresh start to get out of default. You want to enroll in fresh start. But if you're unable to go online or call, or you're struggling to access either of those, you can also use mail, and you can write to this PO box. And in your letter, be sure to include your name, your social security number, your date of birth, and also the following statement: I would like to use Fresh Start to bring my loans back into good standing. So those are just 3 ways that you can take advantage of Fresh Start, which is really great, brings your loans back into good standing, and it's absolutely free. One thing that I do want to warn folks about are debt relief scams. And we've been hearing from a lot of folks that they've been receiving phone calls from people claiming to be the Department of Education. So these scams can include something like offering a loan consolidation or debt forgiveness in exchange for a fee. It could be a bait and switch that includes immediate loan forgiveness or a deadline approaching. And it includes predatory practices such as upfront fees, again, claiming to be the Department of Education and promising loan forgiveness. So be very careful. The Department of Education does not cold call people. And when you're looking for websites such as studentaid.gov, be sure to type that into your browser and not doing a Google search, because you could accidentally find a website that is pretending to be studentaid.gov and clicking on that instead. And you want to make sure that folks are directed to the right place. I know that I've gotten phone calls, but I've also received letters in the mail from companies pretending to be the Department of Education. So I encourage you, do not share personal information over the phone with companies offering debt forgiveness or deadline approaching or anything claiming to be the Department of Education. And if you do have issues or complaints, or if you do share your information with someone and then realize that it was a scam or something along those lines, you can reach out to the Department of Education Student Loan Ombudsman, and they can help you by resolving discrepancies with your loan balances and payments. They can help to explain loan interest and collection charges to you, and they can also help you to identify options to resolve your issues when it comes to consolidation, service quality, default status, bankruptcy, income tax refund offsets, and other concerns. So complaints can be shared with the ombudsman, who's Bonnie Luttrell. She's a really fierce advocate, a really great person. And their office is just really great. I know that they're swamped, but we encourage folks to take advantage of their email. So you can email FSA Ombudsman Office at ed.gov. And I'm sure that someone from my team can drop in that email address in the chat for folks that you can reach out and contact. And as Natalia mentioned at the top of the hour, we are doing this workshop series. So yesterday we did Student Loans 101, the basics, where we talked about loan types, consolidation, loan servicers, and repayment options. To learn more about that, you can go to our YouTube channel. Shayna dropped that link in the chat. You can find the recording for that. After tonight, we will also be posting the recording of this workshop on YouTube as well, so that will also be accessible. And tomorrow at 6 p.m. Eastern and 3 p.m. Pacific, we are going to be doing our 301 series, which is Pathways to Forgiveness, where we will be discussing public service loan forgiveness, teacher loan forgiveness, other forgiveness programs, and IDR forgiveness. And someone will also be dropping that registration link in the chat for you all. And if you want to get even more involved when it comes to advocating for student debt cancellation and for reforms to the system, you can become an SDCC ambassador. So we want to provide a way for you to help your loved ones, yourself, and your networks by spreading the word about these existing programs and updates on the fight for student debt cancellation. It is not over. We're still fighting, and the president is pursuing a plan B. And so you can take advantage of this program to receive emails from us. We also host monthly calls where you'll get new information, but we can also help to answer your questions. And you can feel free to share these resources with, again, friends, loved ones, and others. And I'm going to have someone from my team also drop in that Action Network sign up form in the chat. All right. And with that, we are going to kick off questions. I know we have a bunch of questions in the Q&A, so we're going to try and get to as many as we can. So please be patient with us. But I'm going to toss it to Sabrina Ashley from our team, who's going to be fielding some of them for us. Sabrina?
Awesome. Thank you, Sabrina. All right. I know we've got a lot of questions. I'm going to try to keep them organized, as organized as I can. So the first few are about income. And this is probably the most asked question that we get. But how is discretionary income determined?
So it depends on which IDR you are referring to. SAVE is going to require the least amount of your discretionary income compared to other IDRs. The formula is based on the federal poverty level guidelines. And so folks may remember on the screen, it said 225% of the federal poverty level, which equates to about $35,000 for a single borrower is that threshold where discretionary income begins. And that goes up if your household is larger. For other IDRs, that threshold is lower, meaning more of your income is going to be counted as discretionary.
Great. And when you're also figuring out your annual income, do folks need to include Social Security?
I believe so. And it is worth mentioning, and this was the thing that I was going to say, and I forgot, but now I remembered. When you are applying for an IDR, your income is whatever your income is in the moment, when you're applying. So if you lose your job, or you might be on strike right now, and you only have strike pay or no pay at all, you should apply for an IDR with whatever your income is in the moment. And then the recertification process will sort of even things out over the course of the year.
Awesome. And then in terms of any students who are listening in right now, or anyone who's listening in on behalf of a student, and they would like to, start to look at their options, but maybe they don't make enough to file taxes, how are they able to show that, or what their income is when they're enrolling in these programs?
So when you enroll, you and Natalia, you might want to jump in here because I'm not remembering fully, but you're sort of self-attesting, and you can attach a pay stub if you do have a job. If you don't, you're just sort of claiming that you don't have a job. And the recertification process at the end of the year will sort of rectify any issues.
Correct. So if you aren't making money, you can say that you do not have a job, and you are right that you do have the choice to connect with the IRS, or just self report, and then you can also show pay stubs, I believe, over the past 2 weeks, but pay stubs count as well if you don't have a recent tax return.
Got it. Thank you. The next couple of questions are related to just shifting from being paused on payments to now payments restarting. So this question is, will my minimum monthly payment previous to the payment pause resume on October 1st?
So in terms of timing, your bill date will be provided by your servicer. So it's not necessarily going to be October 1st, but it will be sometime in October. I would say generally, yes, if you have not taken any action on your student loans to change your repayment plan, or if you haven't made any payment, or it very likely will be the same as it was in February of 2020. But you can log into your servicer account, and if you don't know that, you can log into your studentaid.gov account, and there's lots of ways to be able to retrieve your account. We covered that login process in 101 if you need a refresher on that.
And Sabrina, I saw this question in the chat of somebody, that had a payment that they liked. If you were on especially the repay program prior to the pandemic, or a repayment program, as Spencer said, it was essentially just paused, halted in time in March of 2020, and you liked that payment, you do not have to reapply for a repayment, an IDR program, for at least 6 months after October 1st. And we will, of course, be notifying folks when that comes to be. But you are, for all intent and purpose, able to keep that payment from February or March of 2020 right now, and then reapply. So we do know some folks have earned, they actually have seen their incomes go up, and you do not have to reapply immediately. If you've never been on a repayment program, which I know is a lot of you would need to apply for the SAVE program, and IDR programs are not automatic the way the on-ramp program is.
Got it. This next question is kind of going towards the SAVE program. This person said, does Biden's payment pause during COVID count toward the repayment needed for forgiveness under SAVE, similar to the way it does for PSLF?
Yes and no. I mean, so say repay had turned into save, so your time on repay will absolutely still count, and that will be converted now to the save program. Also, if you were enrolled in an income-driven repayment program during the pandemic, that time, or prior, excuse me, to the pandemic, you will get that time during the pandemic as counted time towards your income-driven repayment program.
Got it. This next question has a little bit to do with consolidation. I know a lot of folks in the chat were thinking about consolidating, but then noticing that, if they consolidate, the interest would go up, but then maybe if they consolidate and they enroll in the SAVE plan, the monthly payment would be lower. So folks are just wondering, since it seems a little counterintuitive, if it's worth it in the end to still consolidate and apply for the SAVE program.
So yeah, Spencer, please jump in.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Sorry for that. Each borrower's situation is going to be different, but consolidation can still make sense especially if you're pursuing forgiveness, and you might end up paying less over the course of your repayment because you're getting forgiveness. Also, because SAVE covers any uncovered interest, accrued interest on a monthly basis, it's sort of the higher interest rate on a monthly basis actually may not matter as much, but it does depend borrower to borrower.
All right. And then in terms of consolidation and the SAVE program or a different IDR, and I know this might pertain to specific situations again, but folks are wondering if there's an order to all of this. So should they consolidate before and then utilize an IDR, or the other way around?
If you've never been in an IDR, I would suggest enrolling in one now so that the government has a record that you were ever enrolled in an IDR. But really, basically, right after you do that, I would start the consolidation process because it can take some time. And because repayments are starting, we are hearing some backlogs. So if anything, I would say almost do them simultaneously. But what I wouldn't recommend doing is waiting until your consolidation ends to enroll in an IDR.
Awesome. Thank you. This question is for someone who has a grad loan and has been paying on it for several years. They said if you had a grad loan and have been paying on it and then converted to save, does your 25 years max start over, or do you get credit for those payments?
You get credit for those past payments.
Awesome. Thank you. And then in terms of loans, or I guess this person just said the reduction to repayment forgiveness that's coming in 2024. Does that apply to individual undergrad loans or the total of all of your loans? This person has 4 or 5 different loans with about $45,000 total, but each loan is approximately less than $10,000.
Great question. It is the cumulative, it's all of your undergrad loans together. Now, if you have grad loans, that sort of changes the number of years you need to be in repayment in order to get forgiveness. But it's the cumulative amount on that. But it is measured as the original loan amount that the government sent your school.
Great, thank you. This next question, we have actually a few questions about folks who have a little bit higher income. Our examples are all for folks who are around $40,000 or have about $40,000 in salary. But folks are wondering about if they have $80,000 to $100,000. Is SAVE a beneficial plan for them? And if not, what should higher income folks consider as an alternative?
So SAVE is still going to be a benefit really no matter how high your income, because it protects more of your income from having to pay on student loans. Now, that's obviously going to be a bigger benefit for those that are closer to that threshold, but SAVE will reduce all student loan borrowers' monthly payment. But again, each situation is different. Not all loans qualify for SAVE. And for some borrowers, SAVE may not be the best. You know, for example, if you have grad loans and you might be close to a 20-year repayment timeline, the pay plan might be better. But for all borrowers, SAVE will lower your monthly payment.
Okay, and maybe along that line of thinking, is there a reason why someone would not qualify for SAVE if they have federal direct loans?
No. If you have federal direct loans, you know, all federal direct loans count for the SAVE program. We know, unfortunately, Parent Plus loans do not, but grad loans and undergrad loans do count.
Awesome. And then I know we're a little bit over, but I just have a couple more questions left. This is along, I think, the lines of just a repayment program in general. This person owes $79,000. They've been already paying for 23 years, but if they enroll in in a repayment plan and they make their payments, even if it's as low as $0, they are wondering in, the 20 or 25 years, is it actually going to be forgiven, the remaining ballots?
Yes, it should. The only thing that would prevent it would be any sort of legal challenge or a change in the administration. But even in that case, the action that the Biden administration took in creating the SAVE program builds off of decades of sort of regulatory authority, including those that the Trump administration even used, although most of their actions were not good for borrowers. So, I think that the chances are very, very high that as long as you're meeting the eligibility, you will see that forgiveness at the end of the timeline.
I would concur with Spencer. These are safe programs. You may hear right now there's a challenge to the SAVE program in the House. However, that is, will be vetoed by President Biden. So it is, the way we're taking it is not a threat to the program. We have had income-driven repayment programs for quite some time. The biggest failures with these programs have been, the interest increasing, and which scares borrowers, so they go off the program, and B, the fact that you had to reapply on your own every year for 20 or 25 years. Now, if you want to click the box so the Department of Ed can talk with the IRS, that's taken care of for you. So, while this is not cancellation and it's not a replacement for student debt cancellation, these are really great improvements to the income-driven repayment programs through the SAVE program.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And that answer actually answered our last question. So I will toss it back to you, Natalia.
Great. Thank you so much, Sabrina, Ashley, and thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I'm sure we didn't get to all of your questions, but I know my team tried their best. There was just so many. We really appreciate you joining us today. Please join us tomorrow for our 301, where we will discuss pathways to forgiveness, and we will have time to answer your questions. I believe tomorrow's deck is a bit shorter, so we hope to take even more questions at the end. If you didn't have your question answered today, please sign up for our 301 forgiveness workshop. And thank you all, and to my Student Debt Crisis Center team for joining us this evening to discuss student loans. Have a great night.